So,
what did we find in the Shenandoah caves? Sitchin talks about that a bit. Where are they, and what's found in them?
well, let's see. Maybe we should check with Jeff. Jeff, am I giving you any kind
Dave.
of intelligible answer here?
Yes, I think I understand what you say. I just want to ask one thing before I go, then I'm going to hang up. I'd like to see if you could comment on the so-called battery that they found in Iraq, where they're supposed to have a
2,500-year-old clay pot battery with electrodes in it. Yeah. On the last interview, we talked about the whole general topic of OOPARTs, OOPARTS, those high-tech, out-of-place things in history. Like Volta lived only, 250 or 300 years ago and invented the voltaic cell. But here we have clear traces that have been worked with in laboratories with grape juice or citric acid or something in them that function as batteries. And they were found in the Iraqi desert from 2500 BC, as far as their dating is concerned. Basically, if the new context, if the new paradigm is true, that the Nephilim were here all that time, and we've been here 300,000 years, and were given crash courses in civilizations eventually, then those technologies were probably taught humans for practical purposes, either in direct service of the Nephilim or for their own use. And so what we're really looking at as far as OOPARTs are concerned are the remnants of that technology, of various technologies that were fairly advanced, that were given to humans and then gradually lost perhaps over time, especially after the Nephilim left.
But the battery isn't that sophisticated. I mean, it's a battery. It works. What kind of what does it generate anyway? I mean, what would they use it with? They could electroplate things with it, right?
Probably so, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it wasn't a battery like we think of a battery, literally.
Well, it had all the characteristics, but it was...
What was it? What were they hooking up to? What were they trying to do with it?
The archaeologists who have worked with it are making the assumption or guessing that they were using it for electroplating.
Okay. But still, I mean, even early man, I mean, those societies could come up with it on their own. I mean, it's not that extraordinary. They probably had vinegar or grape juice. They maybe accidentally stumbled upon the fact that it could do this. You don't have to subscribe a very far-out theory to explain the origin of it, is my point, necessarily.
But on the other hand, we didn't have that capability again until just a couple of 200 or 300 years ago, when we ended up with Leyden jars and began to gradually have some concept of what electricity was. So if you figure that battery had to be hooked up in some way or other to the metal that it was going to electroplate, then you have to assume that humans already had figured out that metals could be dissolved in certain acids, that they could use perhaps wires. They would have to have the whole concept of electrolysis. They would have been able to. You have to assume that they had to be able to mine whatever metals they were electroplating, determine which ones were conductors and which weren't, so on, so on, so on. So
it implies a vaster knowledge than a simple battery.
Yeah, it actually does, I think. Okay. You know, and that's probably the reason why, having degenerated in our technology over a long period of time after the Nephilim withdrew, that it wasn't until a couple of 100 years ago that we were able to start even developing the technology.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Dave?
Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Appreciate that. That leaves the Snohomish line open. The number is 348-5757. One quick thing, and then we're going to go next to Owen Ballard. I've had John Anthony West on the show, and I like his theory and shock about dating the Sphinx back prior to the last ice age, or whenever it was that there was a whole lot of water erosion going on in that part of the Sahara Desert. But you mentioned Davidovitz last week, and so I got his book from the library. It's out of print, but they have it. And in there, he's talking about geopolymeric cement, and he's saying that one of the reasons why all of the ancient monuments lasted so long, not all of them, but many of them in Egypt, because all they basically had to work with was soft sandstone, mostly. was that they developed a way to add other metals and he goes into a whole chemical analysis of it and pour this stuff. And that Portland cement that's commonly used in the modern world lasts only 50 years without cracking and breaking up.
Right.
And these cements lasted thousands. But that sandstone you can scratch with a fingernail. Well, he said that the Sphinx, he pointed out, this is generally known, that the Sphinx is an outcropping of sandstone that was carved around it.
Uh-huh.
They carved the body of the Sphinx out of a naturally existing sandstone ledge.
Right.
So the body of the Sphinx is sandstone, just as it is, existing in nature.
Uh-huh.
And they must have taken this other sandstone as other ingredients for, and used it. But that because it's a lot softer than, say, what the rest of the pyramids, according to his theory, were made of, that also would explain why it would be more susceptible to erosion. But then, of course, you have to put a lot of water in there in order to erode it in the first place. But I don't think you can compare it to the erosion rate of the pyramids, say, at least the Great Pyramids.
Definitely not. The sandstone that was clearly sculpted out of was affected, as West and Schock are pointing out, by rainfall. Not necessarily flooding, but by rains. And the amazing thing is that it is well-known fact that it would have been at least 10,000 years ago when that area last saw that type of rainfall.
Torrential rains, yeah. But there was a wet period, I think, maybe 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, I was reading, too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, let's get
which would have accelerated,
Yeah.
That. But as far as the pyramids themselves are concerned, if Davidovitz is correct, and I've looked at his stuff carefully, and he seems to make a very impressive case, not all the pyramids, not the ones that were done by the kings later,
right,
but
the better ones.
The Giza pyramid itself, the interior blocks were probably cast, and with a very sophisticated compound that he recognizes as a form of geopolymer cement, which happens to be the world's leading expert because he invented it.
Erwin Barrett, hi, and thanks for joining us on 570 KVI.
Hello, how are you tonight?
Good, thank you.
I'm going to have to disagree with him. Remember, I told you I remember from my mother's womb, from the time that my mind was sufficiently, evolved, that I've had memory. And you know that humans, babies, go through a metamorphosis before they are ready to be born. In other words,
Now, what's your point here, though? I'm having a hard time following.
From this point is then, if it is exactly like he says, he suggested, the metamorphosis would be different. Now, it's from my memory. I want to speak of my memory. I remember seeing and feeling and being and where I went. It's to be cosmic, not just that this universe, our solar system is relatively new for the Milky Way. That's point one. The other point is civilization, humankind must have, a long time before that, this theory about the planet circling 3,600 years, and so forth and so on, is great. But there is other things that I would have to bring in there that is more involved here. We got sightings, speaking. Now, in my memory, my metamorphosis is like the little great people.
Well, no, okay, but what are you just saying? What do you want to bring up? Let's talk about a real point here.
Yes, he is pointing out that about God, tearing down the theory of Godhood.
Well, actually, what we established at the beginning, and I brought up the point that, you really can't dismiss the fact that there must be a universal, intelligent matrix, or God, if you will, upon which this is a self-aware universe, etc., and that the fact that there were maybe ancient astronauts doesn't mutually exclude the fact that there must be a quote-unquote God, however you want to understand him. And Neil agreed with me on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I do. I believe, though, that God is a living, function entity.
That's what we established, that however you want to understand the larger, greater God as creator of everything is not necessarily dismissed by the fact that here's the theory that says that extraterrestrials came down and helped develop a certain chapter of history in mankind. They're not mutually exclusive. So I'm asking you, what is your point here? What do you want to do?
My point is I question everything. Why?
Well, so do I.
Yeah, but I ask why, and I don't go just...
But give me a specific here.
Okay, now why is the time... We got 40 years that they've blanked out. Well, you got 3,000 years that they're blanked out through the church.
Okay, no, you're not getting specific enough for me. I'm sorry. Paul and Queen Anne, hi. Hi, Paul.
This is Matthew.
Matthew. Hi, Matthew.
Hi. I'm new to this whole ancient astronaut thing, but I hear about alien abductions and missing time. Would that be the Nephilims then coming back maybe to check on our progress, or what is that? How does that relate, if at all?
I am not about to try to give you any kind of definitive answer on that. I can only give you pure speculation on my part, in which I hesitate to do, but
you would know more about this than I would.
Why don't you say this is speculation? That's
Yeah, pure speculation on my part. But I'll speculate for you a little bit.
Okay.
I see two potentially plausible scenarios. One is that having left, the Nephilim continue to discreetly monitor the situation. Eventually, although we know that they had rocket technology, at least while they were here, and there is no mention of anything more than airplanes and rockets, ballistic technology, that eventually they could easily have developed anti-gravitational ability to make crafts that are anti-gravitational.
Well, are you saying that the Nephilim that are stationed here did so, or that the ones on their home planet, that when they did a flyby and they got together again, then it's like, oh, wow, look and see what we've developed since the last time you stopped by?
Exactly. I think that it would be...
It'd be hard to be an outpost and try to develop a major leap.
Sure. And so if they have done that, then they would be using perhaps at least some of the alien crafts that have been sighted here, or that have been done abductions or whatever, could conceivably be Nephilim. The other thing is that, it seems pretty clear that we may have been visited by alien species of a number of different types over time. Laura and I were discussing the Genesis 3 tape that was produced by Lee and Britt Elders a while back that shows during the eclipse of 1991 17 different home videos taken of flying saucers, or at least stationary saucers at that particular point, some of them were flying, over the city of Mexico and surrounds. And it seems quite clear that we have definite, almost overwhelming documentary proof of the situation. But to pin it on the Nephilim or other species, I don't think we're ready to do that yet. I don't think we have enough to do that yet.
And my other question is, you said that the Nephilim planet, every 3,600 years, is that correct?
Well, that is as close as Sitchin can come to putting an actual number on it in the ancient records.
So then where is it now, or is it what has happened to it? Is it going to come again? Has it already come?
Well, one would think that it's kind of coming nearby if suddenly the astronomers are starting to find a planet, mysterious planet X.
Well, it's
wouldn't you?
Kind of a compromise. It's sort of in between those two extremes, either way out or way in. If we look at the ancient records, it by calculation, just by looking at the chronology, it probably has been all the way out and is on its way back in, but it's still quite a ways out. If we look at the information that is coming out of the Naval Observatory and from the astronomical search for it, it is also, in their opinion, all the way out and on the way back in. In fact, they say that if they're going to look for it, and they already have, Harrington from the Naval Observatory sent a large telescope down to Black Birch, New Zealand, so it could look in the southern skies, because he's pretty much determined that's where it should be at this point, because it comes in from the southern skies, crosses the ecliptic, and then travels on its closest part of the trip in through the asteroid belt. It would be in our northern skies. But he has determined that it would be in the southern skies at this particular point, which means that it would be on its farthest part out. So and so there is a correlation, and which is obviously the basis for Harrington's approaching Sitchin and discussing it with him, because the ancient records and what the observers and the astronomers right now are finding correlate pretty closely.
But you said that how they're measuring is that there are permutations in the orbits of some of our outer planets in our solar system that makes them suspect, modern-day astronomers, that, there must be something else out there influencing the orbits of what is it, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and those guys.
Uranus and Neptune.
And you also said that there was a certain date at which the Nephilim supposedly left. What was it, 1250 BC or something?
Right.
Okay, so why don't you add 1250 from BC up to the turning point of BC AD would be 1250, plus it's almost been 2,000 years. So you add that together. How close are we to the 36,000-year orbit?
Well, I think it is. We have to be a little more specific in this case, because if I do the chronology right, and I think that Sitchin does it basically the same way, that planet may have come in here closer to like 200 BC. Now, whether there was anybody looking for it at that particular time or whether it was seen, we don't seem to be able to find any records of it at that point, rather than say, but
there were plenty of people looking up at the sky at that time. I mean, the Chinese have been observing things for a lot earlier than that, so if there was this incredible planetary flyby of this planet, somebody would have noted it.
It would seem so. It would seem so. And so when we go back in the records, though, we don't seem to be able to find too much mention of it. And 200 BC at that particular point, things were it was a pretty dark age at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but the interesting thing is that...
Tom, who are we talking with? Paul, I'm going to put you... Matthew, I'm sorry, I'm going to put you on hold for just a second because we're getting a little bleed through here. So stay there, you're still on. Go ahead.
Okay. It's possible that the 1250 date was the time when they might have had to leave here in order to intercept their planet when it was coming in. That's a conjecture on my part, but we know that they had to use ballistic technology and launch at a certain window so that they could intercept their planet or launch from their planet.
Yeah, but 1,000 years?
I don't know. I would, one of these days I will be able to pin Tom Van Flandern down. I know him personally.
But then a lot of this is, you start with these clay tablets and and I think Sitchin's a little bit guilty of this too. You start with what the clay tablets say, and then in order to correlate this to known events and to this, that, and the other, you have to start constructing these elaborate theories to connect dots that really don't have any basis in anything that you started out with. See what I mean? I have a little problems about building these second and third tier arguments.
Well, it's true, and that's why I qualify them as pure speculation, and I probably shouldn't.
And you did so in the beginning, yeah. We need to take a break. We'll come back on 570 KVI, and you can join the conversation. Our Pierce County line is open at the moment. The number is 751-5757, and our Snohomish line at 348-5757. I'm Laura Lee. We're talking with Neil Freer. He's author of Breaking the Godspell, and we'll be right back just after this timeout.
This is your number one news talk station, 570 KVI. KVI. KVI Seattle. Western Washington's Hot Talk.
KVI News Time is 2:30.
Talking with Freer, and somebody called up wanting Neil's address. Let me give it to you. 6606 Grula Street in Carlsbad, California, 92009. And Neil is the author of Breaking the Godspell. East West Bookstore has copies of his book. Neil, we're back, and just a quick calculation that Nibiru, if this theory of Sitchin's is right, that they left at 1250 BC, and that was about 32 3,250 years ago, and the orbit of Nibiru, according to Sitchin, is 3,600 years. That means it's about 350 years away before it comes back to this sector of our solar system, right? So that's a small slice in terms of a 3,600-year orbit, 350 years, but still, would that be far out enough to cause these permutations in the orbits of our outer planets to cause the astronomers to go, something's out there?
Oh, I see. No, I had a bit of a misconception about what you were asking.
Well, I was asking that you said that Sitchin said that the Nephilim can only go to and fro Nibiru when it's in this very near Earth, very near our sun.
Right.
That it takes the planet X, planet Nibiru, the 12th planet as Sitchin calls it, 3,600 years to make an orbit around the sun and bring it back near the Earth, right? Okay, 1250 BC was 3,250 years ago. You take the 2,000 years that it's been since AD and BC made their turning point, plus the 1250, right? So that gives you 3,250 years. Now that means out of a 3,600-year orbit, there's 350 years left. It seems to me that that's close enough but far enough away that if Nibiru was coming here, that it would be causing those slight fluctuations in the orbits of our outer planets, such that our modern-day astronomers would go, there's something else out there causing these orbits of our outer planets to fluctuate like this. That's why they're theorizing there is a planet X, correct?
And I have to say that your logic is impeccable. That your conclusions are, according to that logic, impeccable. And so your point, if your logic is correct, then there are some discrepancies that we really seriously have to take a look at here, because the dating that Sitchin has done and the way it correlates with what the Naval Observatory people are finding doesn't stack up with that one specific thing, and that is that they would have had to leave very close to the time when it was here before, which is where your logic is starting.
Well, that's what you said, that they can only kind of make a jump from their planet because of their limited but advanced technology.
Right. So we've got a problem here, because if your assumption and my assumption is correct, then there
should be in a different portion of the sky?
No, something's wrong. It means that either they didn't have to leave at that particular point, or the dating that the Naval Observatory, the chronology that the Naval Observatory and Sitchin both sort of agree on, may be wrong, because it goes like this. Well, first of all, I want to make clear that the pull of the gravitational pull that they are talking about does not necessarily mean that that planet has to be in close to them. It can.
It's going to be pulling no matter how far away it is, slightly, right?
Right, and obviously less when it's way out, but they could still be kind of showing an effect from a planet that had passed them a long time ago. So that part is not in question here. In fact, the type of gravitational pull and the amount of it that Harrington and the rest of the observers have noted so far is just slight enough so that it actually indicated to them that it would be quite a ways out. Now, how do we resolve the other part of it? And that is that that the Naval Observatory, particularly after looking at the information that they said they got from the IRIS satellite in 83, 84, which discovered a number, that was an infrared imaging type of satellite that they had put up. It was that information that prompted Harrington to send a telescope to Black Birch. So here he is sending a telescope down to look in the southern skies, which would be the area that he projects it would be in when it was out as far as it could go, and either or just arriving at that point or coming back in. In other words, the southern skies is where it would be when it was farthest out. And you would need a very powerful telescope because it goes so far out, billions and millions of miles, that it would be most likely not visible to the naked eye at all. So the discrepancy comes then if the Naval Observatory and the old records in the chronologies that seem to be pretty clear both agree that it should be all the way out and probably on its way back in, then how come it seems as if the Nephilim phased off around 1250 BC when it wasn't in close?
I see. Okay.
You see what I mean?
There you go. There's the conundrum according to this theory.
There is a conundrum there.
Mm-hmm.
And I quite frankly can't say how that could be. I don't know. If it is true that they had to launch and either from their planet or from the Earth, to make the actual shuttle connection.
Let's check back in with Matthew and what else?
Well, my final thing was, what was the basic underlying principle or goal, for that matter, of the Nephilim coming to this planet? What was it they were after? Why?
The best explanation is one that I've reiterated a couple times, and that is.
So let's make it brief this time.
That it was gold that they were here for.
What was the purpose of gold?
Huge amounts of it, apparently, and I'm taking Sitchin's word for it at this point when he goes into those details. The best he can interpret is that they were looking for huge amounts of gold to do some kind of sophisticated molecular seeding of gold in their atmosphere of that planet, which is, by all the records, Neptune size, pretty much agreed on even by the Naval Observatory. Neptune size, a huge planet, 5 to 6 times the mass of the Earth, I believe. And so it would be a huge sphere in their atmosphere that they were looking to do molecular seeding on. I have no concept because I have never been able to...
We should send them some of our CO2.
I'm sorry?
We should send them some of our CO2.
CO2 also, or CO2? But at any rate, that was the purpose of it.
Where does it say that? Now, Sitchin just kind of... he's never actually put that in one of his books, what the Sumerian texts say this. I mean, if they were exiles from, renegades, exiles from their own planet, or if they, some other scenario would make a whole lot more sense in a resonant mythological fashion than they were here to take gold to come back in and make their own atmosphere.
No, not make their own atmosphere, to see the atmosphere. Probably because they needed... It was always always described, consistently described as a very radiant planet. And that, we're...
Right, and they're trying to capture some of their radiance to make their climate a little more stable. But where does it say that in the ancient text? That they were here to take gold back to their own planet for that purpose? I have never seen a reference to a specific text. That's my point. It's an interpretation on his part. And where is he getting it? He says that he sees it in the text that he has read, and I can only repeat what he's saying in this case. But was it very, very, very sketchy, such that he's not willing to kind of put it in the book? He has mentioned it, I believe, in Genesis Revisited. Mm-hmm. And if he has mentioned it in there, it's probably solid enough in his mind because he's an extremely conservative scholar. Mm-hmm. I've asked him about a number of things, or asked him to discuss in his books a number of things, and if he doesn't have solid enough information, he won't even touch it. Right. Okay. Matthew?
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
Answer your question?
Thank you. Yep.
Thanks for the good one. Go ahead, Rick. Rick, our newsman. Rick O'Brien.
Well, actually, I had a question about the if there's a discrepancy in the time period that the folks from Planet X could have come 300 and whatever years. Could it be that there's a window of opportunity that maybe at the one edge and one other edge, there's a discrepancy there as far as maybe they have a 500-year window of opportunity to get here and back?
That's a good one.
I've looked at the diagrams and stuff of projected orbits and launch periods and stuff, and it seems as if the launch, any of the diagrams that I've seen, particularly in Sitchin stuff, all seem to start the launch from their planet into the Earth, seems to start within the confines of our solar system, which is kind of interesting to me because that would mean that it would not be in huge extended period of time. And I would assume that the launch would be fairly similar on the way back out. In fact, I think that there's pretty clear indication that just about the time when Nibiru comes in through the asteroid belt and hits, that would be perigee or apogee, that would be perigee, I think. When it hits perigee is about the time that they had to launch from the Earth. Well, that's very close into the solar system, and that, and at the speeds that even ballistic technology would acquire, that would reach at that point, it probably would not be. It might be within less than 100 years.
They've had 450,000 years, apparently, from when they... I mean, I'm trying on this theory now. I'm not saying I buy it. I'm just trying it on here.
Sure.
If they've had 450,000 years since they developed, at least, ballistic technology, who knows what they've done since then? Maybe they've developed some other form of getting from point A to point B across vast distances where they wouldn't need to have these narrow windows of time.
Well,
but then again, this is a second, third, and fourth tier kind of argument here.
Exactly, and that's why I kind of avoid, because, I mean, when if we use ourselves as a base of criteria in this case, we know that we have engineers who are working in anti-gravitational systems, or at least working towards them, and they know pretty much what the characteristics are going to be and so on of those. So we've got a handle on it, and it won't be too long probably before we'll have anti-grav. And we've only been around 300,000 years, with a little help from them, and an example from them. So I could start to speculate and say, well, maybe by the time that they were ready to leave, they had already developed, some craft like that made them totally independent of ballistic technology and having to do that. But I prefer to back off and not speculate too much like that.
Right. Well, I have a speculation, and that is that I keep waiting for the alternative energy device to be developed that's actually going to work, and I've come to the conclusion that it just isn't going to do it. You're not going to get free energy from the void or zero-point energy or whatever to do a disharmonic frequency such as what's needed to plug into our particular electrical grid at the moment. It like doesn't make sense if you're trying to take energy from nature as a free source, that it would become a disharmonic source detrimental to life, as I'm told electromagnetic fields are. And maybe it would do some other frequency, but I don't think it's going to do 220 volts or whatever we are here. And that maybe that maybe when you get onto a different energy grid, something that's a frequency that's a little more harmonious, then maybe some of these alternative energy device ideas will start kicking in and actually producing something compatible to a more harmonious frequency.
Well, certainly I agree in general, but I also think from a practical and probably cynical point of view that if somebody came up with a device to tap the zero-point energy tomorrow, and I think that some people have, quite frankly, in some of the Tesla technology, but there will be an immediate scramble on the part of the engineers from SDG&E or down here or wherever to maybe make a transformer, so that you can plug the zero-point energy in.
A converter, a midway step point.
Convert it immediately to 110, 110 and 220.
I keep waiting. Let's take our next call from Richard in Bellevue. Hi, Richard.
Hello. Interesting program. I started reading Sitchin's book.
Sitchin?
Not too long ago, and I found it to be interesting. And I had a question for
Neil.
If these people were to reappear, say, tomorrow, and make themselves known, what does he think would happen to the existing
social order,
the religious
to the planet,
aspect, social, political? What does he think would happen?
Well, I know that he probably wouldn't answer the question.
No, who are you referring to?
Sitchin in this case. Sitchin tends to, he has made a major contribution, I personally subjectively believe, in the archaeological area, and he pretty much sticks to that. He will not, he tells people if he does a lecture that if they want to consider the ramifications in any way, shape, or form, they probably should read my book. Because I'm willing to take a look at that. I'm willing to ask the questions just as you are. What would happen if they showed up here tomorrow? I think that we have reached a point in our own independent development so that there would be a wide spectrum of response, but I don't think that we'd be totally intimidated, at least some of us. Now, on the other hand, those who are holding to a literal, sublimated concept of the gods into some kind of cosmic god, and who are adhering to the Old Testament in a fundamentalist type of way, might have some real problems, and I could really empathize with them. And those of us who are most still moved by the old Godspell mentality of subservience, of looking up, as Laura said before, of looking up in the sky, waiting for Daddy to come back and tell us what to do, but they're the ones that are going to have the most problem, because they will act in a subservient manner. I don't think that I'm going to do that. I would have a very, very serious problem with them if they came back and tried to turn me into some kind of subservient slave again. From a practical point of view, if they come back, Yahweh, if he was indeed a Nephilim humanoid, said very explicitly in the Old Testament, it's recorded there, the gold and the silver are mine. And if he comes back here and he's looking for the gold and the silver, he may even have some problems with a great number of humans who have a great deal of proprietary interest in either gold krugerrands or gold silver dollars or some of the
wedding ring around your finger,
or the Hunt brothers and their silver.
Yeah, I think it would be very interesting if that were the case.
Yeah, I would ideally like to see us reach a point of genetic enlightenment, in the sense of recognizing what our true beginnings are. See ourselves come together as a planetary race and reach a very serious and profound new plateau of planetary unity and consciousness, with full realization of what our true history is, so that we can go on forward and resolve many of the problems of our present. And so that if they did come back here, it would be more like a reunion with of the mature person who had rejected their parents, or at least moved away from them in adolescence or early maturity, and gotten their act together, quite frankly, sufficiently so they knew themselves well enough so that there could be a comfortable reconciliation with parents if there had been friction, or there had been a kind of dominance on the part of the parents that they found unacceptable or intolerable.
There comes a point in any parent-child relationship where you grow up enough and the parents recognize that you start relating as equals, right?
Right. And I'm saying that, by analogy or by comparison or parallel, that I think ideally that would be the most graceful transition that we could make. Almost to the point of, if we do get out space traveling and they haven't showed up here yet, and they're still letting us, alone, it would be almost like taking the kids to the grandparents for a visit.
No,
what we really need to see happen is, what we need first is a serious consideration of the new paradigm from a critical point of view on the part of the scholars in every field. We need the critical analysis of all the archaeologists. We need the critical analysis of the anthropologists and the biologists and the mitochondrial DNA researchers. Unfortunately, too many of the mitochondrial DNA researchers who could answer some of the very basic questions, like I asked when I was speaking with Doug Wallace, who is one of the leading genetic researchers in this area on the search for Eve. I spoke with him, and in the course of the conversation, I said, what is, if we were literally a genetically spliced species, half Nephilim, half Homo erectus, say, to make it simple. The proportions may not be exactly like that, but what would be the characteristics that you, as an expert geneticist, would go probing for to actually determine if we were a genetically engineered species? And he said, when we finally read, in 5 years, 10 years, or maybe sooner, when we read out the entire human genome, we may have sufficient information to tell us what to look for. But he said, I don't think that with the techniques and the knowledge that we have now, that we could actually pin that down definitively. And I appreciated him being that frank with me. Also, he said, I have a major consideration here, in that if it is true, and it seems to be, that our genome as humans differs from that of a chimpanzee, say, by only
0.1%.
Well, some say 1, some say 5, some say 4.76. There is then what leeway is there for finding a genetic gene splice? And I said, well, he said that I have a real problem with it. I said, well, I have a real problem with it too, but I'm asking you as a geneticist to give me some kind of feedback on this.
Sure.
And in a sense, what it really boils down to is that if even 1% can make us this different from a chimpanzee, then perhaps there is sufficient leeway to say that this creature, whatever it was, Homo erectus, that we have at least paleontological record of, was sufficiently different so that the Nephilim genes imposed, or the splicing of half the species, still could be accomplished and still be determined by the geneticist if they go seriously looking for it.
Mm-hmm.
But the trick is, the problem is, the frustration is, to get them to go look in the first place, because they don't want to commit to something that goes, because where they think, as a geneticist who doesn't read the literature of the archaeologist and the biologist and many of the other people, they would be reading the biology text, but they don't read the astronomers. They don't read the archaeology text. They read their texts in their journals, in their specific field of expertise.
So we need a little more interdisciplinary thinking here.
Exactly. And if that biologist who is doing the mitochondrial DNA research has any inclination to question an archaeologist, he's going to really hesitate. And if he thinks that the archaeologists are going to think that it's total cosmic foo-foo to even consider this paradigm, he's not going to even look at it. And so that is a continual frustration, especially to me as a generalist, where I have to, in all intellectual honesty, I have to examine everybody's and try to understand everybody's stuff, including, the archaeologist and the geneticist and the anthropologist and the linguist. I mean, there's so much stuff coming out in the linguistic field. Excellent article in one of the fairly recent Scientific Americans doing a thorough study, which is practically a lifetime's work in itself, of the tie-in between the languages that we find in the North American Indians, the Native American Indians, and those in Central and South America, and how they relate, if they do, to languages in Asia and Europe and the Middle East. And it turns out that there are definite correlations that the linguist with sufficient research and skill are able to establish.
Barry Fell's been saying that for years. His theory is that some of those people came over, crossed the ocean or whatever, got here, and intermingled with those particular tribes.
Right. And yet linguists up until fairly recently have not really gone into that. There's another scientist who has been able to trace dentition, the peculiar shape of teeth, and he's been able to literally trace and find parallels. After the fact, he went back and found parallels to the genetic information, but to the people in northern China and some of the people in Eurasia, some of the people in North America, and so on. So here we have biological vectors coming together that back up the Bering Strait land bridge theory of transmigration. But too often, the stuff is delayed for a long time.
Because the scientists in one area aren't reading what the scientists in another area are doing.
Yes.
Well,
I think a lot of people are just afraid of what they...
what it all might mean. Hold it. I will put you on hold, and I want to hear your comments when we come back, so don't go away. This is Laura Lee on 570 KVI. We'll be right back with Neil Freer.
This is Western Washington's #1 news talk station, 570 KVI. KVI Seattle. Hot talk for the Northwest.
KVI News Time is 3 o'clock.
Mutual news. Denver officials are concerned that many of the tens of thousands of people planning to celebrate Mass with the Pope later today may fall victim to heat stroke. Some 6,000 already have. But as correspondent Steve Futterman tells us, this is just too important for many people to miss.
It was one of the most moving moments of the Pope's trip so far, as a number of people gave personal testimonies. One of them was James Mozette of New York.
Available at the East West Bookshop, and also if you want information about Neil's upcoming Seattle appearances, 206-458-5347. Neil, let's get the comments of Richard in Bellevue. Hi, Richard. We didn't mean to cut you off. I want to hear your comments.
Well, basically what I was just going to say is that the reason that a lot of people may not want to look into it is they're scared of what may be found. I mean, it's kind of an unsettling thought to find it, rather than having evolved, that you were genetically engineered to be a slave.
That puts it in a nutshell, I think.
But if that's true, look how far we've come. And then one could ask, well, so who genetically engineered these Nephilim folks? Or where did they come from? Did they evolve naturally?
And they may have, if they do in fact exist, and that's something we may never know. But it seems that now that we're starting to find out about ourselves, kind of learning what our capabilities are, learning what makes us what we are. Who knows what's going to happen in the next?
One thing I wonder though is
centuries.
The fact that we're now beginning to genetically engineer other species. I mean, the violence, as one caller put it last week, or gene splicing of tomatoes, etc. And the fact that we're now capable of rocketry, and we're now capable of communications over vast distances. And Neil, I'm going to have you talk about some of the communications devices that Sitchin theorizes that these Nephilim had. Are we then looking back and seeing these gods with a small g in light of our own capabilities? Or are our capabilities in imitation subconsciously? Are we carrying out what was impressed upon us at this early stage? If this ancient astronaut theory is true, doesn't that also enter into the thinking, Richard?
I think a little bit. I've, as I said, I just started reading what he's been writing. Sitchin's been writing. Sitchin, how you pronounce it, and it's interesting. I mean, who knows? Maybe in a couple hundred years we're going to end up going maybe to Mars, and we
probably sooner than that.
And we find some life form there, and then we do the same thing. I mean, who knows?
They're already talking about trying to make Mars into another Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And scientists are spending a great deal of time figuring out, well, how do we seed Mars to become a planet abundant with life such as our own?
Yeah, and maybe what they'll end up doing is, if they do find some organic material or some organ fossil or whatever, they'll end up using gene splicing to that end. I mean, who knows? The potential is there. I've been reading that the potential is there that we can extend our life for who knows how long now, through manipulating genes.
And I think in general, we can say that by the very fact that we've reached this level of technology, we've allowed ourselves to understand, give ourselves the keys to understanding how those things could have been done in the past, because that's been a major obstacle. It's when we had lost as much as we had lost and gotten to the Dark Ages, and then come up to this point in time. Back there, just not too long ago, maybe even 150 years ago, everything that was attributed to the gods seemed totally fantastic to us. Just the simple fact of being able to fly through space. I mean, we take that totally for granted now.
Oh yeah. I mean, what was science fiction 20 years ago is fact. I mean, you've got pocket wristwatch televisions. You've got the phones you can carry around wherever you go. I mean, if you put modern man in the same situation as the Planet X people may have been in, we would be looked at as gods.
Sure. And you can say that facetiously, perhaps, but if it is true that these gods wear designer genes, G-E-N-E-S, then we really have to take a look at the ramifications, because they are immediate. And as you pointed out so well, there is a major psychological barrier simply because those ramifications are looked at as almost too much to handle for religion, for science, for the evolutionist, creationist conflicts. And so that's where my focus has been, and that's why I wrote, Breaking the Godspell, to actually examine those ramifications. Just the simple thing of the most general thing, and that is that we know that those things could be possible, and that we conceivably could even do them ourselves. And so it opens up a whole new field of our attention, even with Mars, where there are artifacts or monuments or stuff that has been discovered on Mars that NASA doesn't even want to, has been reluctant to go back up and say, and commit to photographing. And
like
so,
the face.
because, like the face on Mars. And because anybody with ordinary intelligence knows that if they did discover alien artifacts or artifacts on Mars, it opens up all the questions that you've pointed up are going to be opened up. But if we have the simple courage to systematically examine what the ramifications are,
you might be pleasantly surprised.
Well, I'm very pleasantly surprised as far as I'm concerned, but there are many people that simply don't want to acknowledge them as pleasant.
Why are you so pleasantly surprised? What
Probably because
have you come up with?
Probably because I'm built like you are. And the people that are in your audience. I'm eager to learn everything I can. I want to know, and if what I find out is scary or disconcerting, I say that's great. Let's go with it. But if you are caught, I keep coming back to the news briefs at the breaks when I'm having Ovaltine and listening to my Nat King Cole records here. Sam Lipsinger is talking about the Pope coming to the United States and what is transpiring during his visits, and what are we going to do if religion indeed is the sublimation of that old master-slave relationship into institutionalized forms? What are we going to do about the Pope and
I guess make up our own minds about birth control and not feel guilty about it.
But it goes deeper than that, because the entire belief system and structure of Western culture in our civilization is built not only on those values which are being questioned, but on the basic principles, under God, in our Constitution. And
well, then, at a time when society at large is starting to question those values, is it not interesting that the scientific wherewithal to maybe support a theory such as the ancient astronaut theory is arriving at the same time? That can't be just coincidental, can it?
I don't think so. I mean, I think all of the psychological factors and the scientific factors and the sociological factors all come together at the same time, because we're one piece of cloth.
In a self-aware universe, I'd say.
Uh-huh.
Who knows? Maybe this could be the as we learn more and become more aware. Maybe this is what I've heard Laura Lee talk about it a lot. The new paradigm. As we become self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I'd agree with that. Well,
interesting.
Sometimes I wonder if the vitamin C issue, did you realize that I think guinea pigs and rats are the only other mammal besides man who don't manufacture vitamin C in our own bloodstream? That takes 4 enzymes. We've got 3 out of 4 enzymes to create vitamin C. And sometimes I wonder, well, how did that happen? Other than maybe somebody turned off a certain, gene there. Are there did you come across any other peculiarities of the human system, Neil, that are Richard, that caused you to wonder, how did this happen?
Well,
I get so tired of taking all that vitamin C every day. I hope they put it back and fix it.
Well, I mean, if this all ends up being true, which I'm skeptical.
Me too.
Because it may be, it may not be. I mean, who knows? We won't know until someone sees this big ball coming, this big planet.
But it certainly serves as the basis for some interesting conversation.
Yeah, if we do end up meeting these people, maybe we'll get the answers we're looking for.
Well, which brings up probably the trickiest part of the entire subject to deal with, because it's the paradigm sort of re-examining itself. The paradigm says that if this is true, then the theological criteria that we've used to judge truth and reality itself is suspect. That if we are indeed a creature with the capabilities that we see ourselves with, then reason, which is the traditional tool of the philosopher, is perhaps not adequate anymore. If the scientists are questioned on some of the basic postulates like evolution and have to correct themselves, that creates a problem for sciences as a criteria too. So if we look at those 3 major criteria bases, theological, philosophical, and scientific, and we say to ourselves, okay, what criteria do I use to tell which one of them is the most accurate, so that I have some kind of thing to hang my hat on here to begin at least an analysis of, let's say, the archaeological information. We come up with a pretty much of a redundant and closed loop.
But what if... Go ahead, finish your thing.
Well, I can only suggest at that point, and people say, well, okay, what kind of criteria are we going to use? I can only suggest that history, in a sense, seems ultimately to become its own criteria, because it is history, not philosophy, not science, and not theology primarily, that has vindicated, say, Galileo after literally hundreds of years. Within the cultural and religious context in which he lived, the authorities could put him under house arrest for teaching a type of science and factual information that they were powerful enough to suppress.
But look what happened once word of his discovery got out, that it ushered in a whole new scientific renaissance.
Very true. Very true.
So perhaps the same thing would happen to us here if we got a lid taken off of a belief that had held us within its fist for so long.
Right. And in effect, I'm really suggesting that is precisely what is happening. Bits and pieces of it constantly come together, and if we look at the work that's been done by the Mars group, the Mars mission group, Hoagland, Torin, Carlotto, DiPietro, and Molinar, and Dan Drayson, just to rattle off the names of those very respectable scientists and engineers who have been examining thoroughly, geomorphologists too. Earl Torin works for the Defense Mapping Agency as a geomorphologist. What I'm suggesting is that here's a whole block of information about Mars that's being examined intensely, and the implications immediately being recognized that it probably was not somebody from Earth who did that, and so we're pretty much limited to an alien species. Richard Hoagland is saying, well, if that's the case, they must have come from really far away, because there's no other place they could have come from in our solar system that but Richard doesn't take into consideration the fullness of the Nephilim paradigm. If they could fly here, they could fly there. So the problem is that it takes such a long time for the bits and pieces to come together. But I think inevitably, I have to resign myself to the fact that it will take a long time for the paradigm to hit, because of the fact that it is such a major change, and also because it will take a long time for the psychological factors to allow us even to bring all these vectors together. But again, people continually ask me, well, as a philosopher, what do you say? How do you come up with a criteria by which we can judge the criteria that we normally use? And
it's more than fancy footwork. Okay.
More than fancy footwork. I don't have. It's.
Well, here's a suggestion then. How do you see? You're saying that we're on the next step of an evolutionary leap. It would seem to me that part of that would be a new functioning of our brain, and that rather than having to switch, here's our left brain operating, now here's our right brain operating, and I think it's been shown that the way that we breathe through our nostrils is predominantly left or right, and that has to do somehow with the brain being predominantly left or right. Mm-hmm. That somehow we're going to synthesize the two functions so that they're working in conjunction, and so that just like we can see further when we use both eyes together, we have depth of vision, than when we use one or the other eye. Mm-hmm. So we could have brain functioning that would, if we truly were, and I don't think we are. You can hook us up to brain machines now, and we're not really there yet on a practical hour-to-hour basis yet of using our full brain potential in terms of the way it functions. But it would seem to me that if we were, then we would have an analytical and an intuitive side functioning that would give us a better depth of perception than the either or, and we could get out of, at that point, we might be able to get out of this either or dualistic framework that also, I think, keeps us a little too captive. Mm-hmm. And perhaps that would allow us then to analyze information in a new way. It would resonate with us at the same time where we're finding validation from a more scientific way. The intuition might guide us a little better, and the scientific might keep us on track. Simultaneously, we might get to the answers we need. Just as one aspect of many in terms of this new evolutionary leap.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe as science develops, they'll figure out ways that will enable us to take more advantage of what our brain can do. I mean, it seems like science has just barely begun to scratch the surface. There's a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily accepted, but it's just.
Well, also, perhaps Neil, in the literature that you sent me, you also mention a multidimensional, hyperdimensional aspect to things. This idea of 4D, and that 4D is a state of brain functioning. It's a state where consciousness becomes just a little more aware of itself, and it can navigate it more in waking state. There's just more to, right? It's a different state of brain functioning, in other words, this access to 4D. It would seem to me that perhaps these Nephilim, one way that they might have exited Earth was maybe they finally figured out how to access 4D. We've had a lot of the guests then theorize, from people, cell biologists to geophysicists to all sorts of folks, to people looking at ancient mystery schools, saying, okay, next step of human evolution is to access 4D consciously, whatever 4D means.
Sure.
I see it as another dimension of consciousness, and that I don't know what the road to this is. A lot of the ancient schools of wisdom, I guess, were trying to get us there in some aspect or another. Mm-hmm. But it just seems to me that being peopled with 4D, I mean, who's to know what's there? And I think that intuition might be, in my estimate, what our intuition is accessing 4D in a subconscious way, in a way that's not conscious, but we're still partly there. I think we're halfway there to 4D. We function in it. Some part of us is already there, but our little waking state that opens up its eyes and sees this 3D reality is left behind. Mm-hmm. But that some part of us also can pull in information and knowledge and experience from 4D, and that's what our intuition is. That's why it's precognitive. It's why it's more holistic than just our waking state conscious mind. That's why it knows things in advance or in the past, or can access a greater timeline.
But people aren't trained. They don't. I think if anything, you have to look inside.
Well, that's what intuition is.
But I think as a society, I don't think.
Well, some societies
I don't think people know that.
Did.
I think if you
well, maybe we're rediscovering that then.
Maybe we are. I mean,
maybe it's time.
Yeah, maybe organized religion. I mean, believe what I say, believe what I do. Well, not necessarily what I do. I mean,
right. Believe in an outside authority, so you don't have to believe in your inner authority, so you can listen to some outside authority, not listen to your own inner voice, right?
Mm-hmm. And
it's one of its functions. Whether it's intended or not, I don't know, but it seems to be one of the functions.
My view is that organized religion is primarily a control issue.
Maybe it's not such a bad thing. Maybe if mankind was disconnected from an inner voice or an inner authority, maybe we needed something like an outside authority. Just, we're social animals. Maybe people came together and organized religion developed because it was needed. It was necessary as a system, because we weren't functioning totally the way we should have, and it was an outside assistance. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe it's something that we're finally starting to learn on our own.
Yeah, so.
Which is great.
And about time, right? Any last comments, Richard?
Just one.
Go ahead.
What's it going to be if it turns out that both the evolutionists and the creationists are right?
I think they probably are.
We evolved our way and then were created.
We'll get Neil's comments on the other side. Thank you for some real good discussion, Richard.
Thanks a lot. Good show. Bye.
And we'll come back, and just after this news break with Neil Freer, we have one line open at 421-5757. I'm Laura Lee on The Laura Lee Show on 570 KVI.
This is your number one news talk station, 570 KVI. KVI. KVI Seattle. Western Washington's Hot Talk.
KVI News Time is 3:30.
Denver officials are concerned that many of the tens of thousands of people planning to celebrate Mass with the Pope later today may fall victim to heat stroke. Some 6,000 already did on Saturday. But as correspondent Steve Futterman tells us, it's too important for many people to miss.
It was one of the most moving moments of the Pope's trip so far, as a number of people gave personal testimonies. One of them was James Mozet of New York, a cerebral palsy victim. He told how prayer helped him learn to walk. Then he addressed the Pope.
I would like to tell the Holy Father that, Holy Father, I love God. Thank you.
James Mozet then walked to the Pope and received the blessing. Steve Futterman, Denver.
The Pontiff himself used last night's prayer vigil to denounce abortion, artificial birth control, euthanasia, and moral anarchy. I'm Paul Henderson.
From the KVI 24-hour computer traffic watch, traffic seems to be...
We're talking with Neil Freer. His book, Breaking the Godspell, is available at East West Bookshop. You can also write to Neil at 6606 Grula, G-R-U-L-L-A Street in Carlsbad, California, 92009. And if you want to know about his upcoming Seattle appearances, call 206-458-5347. And we've been talking about the ancient astronaut theory. Neil's been one of the only people I know of to really put a whole lot of thought into the implications. Well, I guess Richard Hoagland does this as well, quite a bit. But if it's really true, this ancient astronaut theory and all the particulars, such as the Sumerian clay tablets of Sumer, suggest, then what does it mean? You can help us speculate on this by calling us at 421-5757. And let's take our next caller. Oh, hold it. Tom, hold on just a moment. Neil, last caller wanted to know. He posed a question for you. I'm sorry, I wrote it down. Jim, do we have Neil? Okay.
Well, I think he finished up with a comment.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that his comments were right on, and I think that you are articulating it very well, because it resonates with one of the major points I was making in Breaking the Godspell, and that is that the subservience that we have put on ourselves has, in a sense, been a real handicap. But your point is also, I think, extremely valid, and that is that in order to fill in the void, at least temporarily, in the process of moving from subservience to independence, that maybe we needed to do what we did to ourselves, although we seem to have lost a lot of humans in the shuffle. But we really shouldn't be too hard on ourselves. We're the only game in town, and probably doing the best as a species that we can and that we could so far. But at this point, I think
there's a lot of beauty in human nature to celebrate, and
absolutely.
Yeah. Let's take our next caller, Tom in Federal Way. Hi, Tom.
Well, hi, Laura. Hi, Neil.
Hi, Tom.
Hi.
I'll tell you, you covered a lot of ground tonight. I just finished reading.
Hey, the talk is hot here.
What's that?
I was just reiterating one of our promos. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I just finished reading all of Zechariah Sitchkin's books. 2 days ago was the last I finished the last page of it.
I see.
And I've been dying to talk to somebody about this.
Uh-huh.
And I read Richard Hoagland's books just before that. So
Are you a regular listener to the show, or did you just happen on
well,
to us?
I started out by listening to you one night.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went down to the bookstore and started out. And but I've had a lot of thoughts on these things, and I'd like to get a few of my 2 cents worth in before I ask my question.
Sure, put them right out.
I've been wanting to jump in with some of those other callers, and I couldn't. Well, as far as what Rick said, and you're talking about the the orbit of Nibiru. If they leave Nibiru as they're approaching the solar system, and they're going to arrive here on Earth before Nibiru gets close, and then they have to take off to reach it as it's leaving the solar system. If they took off at 1250 BC, 3,600 years would be just one of their years. It would be one of their orbits to takeoff time again. So it's quite possible that, they're going to get here before the planet ever even becomes visible to us.
I really got to work on this with an astrophysicist. One of these days, I've set it as a goal to convince Tom Van Flandern to do some of these precise calculations and see how it would work out. He doesn't seem to contradict the general kind of format that Sitchin has laid down, but I'm sure that he could really contribute something there. To get him to do it is the problem.
Not only that, I feel like as the planet's approaching the inner solar system, it's going to be speeding up anyway. So it's going to be approaching faster than it's traveling as it's going out far away anyway. But also, as I was reading his books, the thought occurred to me that if they came back, if they weren't here right now, and if they came back, they're going to find not slaves, but they're going to find humans with an attitude problem.
Very, very definitely.
You and I are one of them, aren't we?
Yeah. Kind of like my 16-year-old daughter, And also, I was watching Jurassic Park, the movie. I'm sitting there and I'm watching it, and I'm thinking, holy cow, I just read that in Sitchin's book. Here they're taking some dinosaur DNA and merging it with a modern frog. And here we were apparently equivalent to a dinosaur, Homo erectus, being merged with the more advanced Nephilim. And and then they talk about in there what happens if they run amok or something, and the scientist says, well, we have one control substance in their diet, it's amino acid, and we can always just keep that from them and they'll die off, And I'm thinking, there's
Good analogy.
There's Zechariah talking about in his books about the fact that to maintain their long-livedness or their longevity, they have to periodically drink this ambrosia from Nephilim.
Right, and it was interesting that one time one of them got so far out of line that they voted in council to withdraw that from him.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting that life found a way and went ahead with or without their caretakers.
Right.
And you're saying that humankind did the same thing.
Right. I don't know, Zechariah stops at about 2024 when the spaceport in the Sinai was destroyed. And that's kind of where he left me hanging. I don't know where you get this 1250 BC number that they left. Do you have any statement that you'd make real quick on that?
Yeah, the 1250 BC number is a date that
Well, there aren't there clay tablets where they lament, "Oh, the gods left me," and they're kneeling before an empty throne, and there's just some general tablets that start singing lamentable songs about the gods left, right? That's the reference I heard you say last.
And but I would like to give full credit to the fact that what really called that to my attention was, or who called that to my attention was Julian James, because he has carefully documented that a type of psychology occurring at that particular point in time, and it was not something I discovered myself. It was something I realized after having read his work, even though I don't happen to completely agree with his thesis.
So Sitchin doesn't give a date of 1250 BC. This is your own.
No, he doesn't. Mm-hmm. He doesn't. He does. In fact, he pretty much leaves it as they left. As they just left the planet.
Well, what if they didn't? What if they just sort of went
underground,
so to speak, as a shadow director, a shadow government type thing?
Well, of course, then you're immediately into some of the conspiracy theories that have have been put out. That there are, any single one that comes to mind is The Gods of Eden by William Bramley, which is not his true name, by the way. I've lectured with him, and that's a pen name. But Bill Bramley, unfortunately, for my subjective appreciation, tends to just lump together all of the reptilians, the little gray guys, the Nephilim, everything that he's ever heard about as far as extraterrestrials are concerned. He lumps them all together and says that the Guardians and they are definitely in cahoots with at least some part of humanity to control the entire planet. I tend to have a great deal of reservation about that. But, from another point of view, again, pure speculation, there have been the persistent legends from the East of superior, godlike beings that were humanoid, who lived in caves in the high Himalayas and that sort of thing.
A little more beneficent than the others were described in terms of their character, though.
Right. That's very true. And so like, who really is Babaji, you're saying, right? And some of those other guys, right? Well, even higher, they're supposed to be, like farther removed and higher than those, and who lived in pretty good, luxurious conditions and were allowed some Englishman who was in the subcontinent
what is it? Masters of the Far East or something? What's the... it was the 5-part books. Yeah. The Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East, right? You're talking about that series?
I don't think that was the title that I saw. This was a small book, and I think it was only a single volume. But maybe it was written by along the same lines. I can't even remember the title, but it was back in the 60s that I saw it.
What did it say, basically?
Basically, it was talking about an Englishman who was an explorer and was visiting the East in northern India, as I recall, and he had made very good friends with a lama, and somehow or other the lama was either told to or decided that he should be, in other words, told to bring this Englishman on. But somehow or other, through this lama, he got to travel up into this remote part of the mountains. Snow was mentioned, I believe, to some cave that led into the mountains, and he was able to meet these people, and was taught by them and treated cordially and benevolently, and then he left and wrote the book about it. I can't remember the name of the book itself, though. Anyway, basically, I think we should at least acknowledge the persistent legends and tales of the possibility that there were at least remnants of the Nephilim either left here or chose to stay here. But I don't know about the underground thing. But again, I do tend to speculate out loud, and sometimes I find. But
what about a state of consciousness being able to generate the masters of the Far East as well, the way that the one book that I read about it? I mean, it seems to me you're still subscribing to a very mechanistic scenario to explain supernatural or metaphysical events.
Well,
and so be it in the scientific age that
I think that Occam's razor holds here. I think that if we have historical stuff to consider, that we should stick to the historical stuff. On the other hand, some of the questions that we began to address in the last interview, like did the Nephilim, were the Nephilim themselves in possession of some high metaphysical doctrine? I always like to try to establish the caveat, or at least lay down the premise that I think that too often we tend to look at what we call metaphysical and religious now, or the type of doctrine that is included in the occult, and we put a a significance on that is unfortunately a transference of some of the Godspell mentality. On the other hand, if we come at it from our point of view and try to take a fresh, open view of it and say what really is the metaphysical, what is the transcendental, then I would respectfully submit that we should consider precisely what you were talking about before, the evolution, the literal evolution of our consciousness to be able to perceive higher and higher dimensions, and that and use the metaphors of advanced physics and quantum theory to reinterpret precisely what the masters were talking about in the first place. Because it seems quite clear that the masters who are said to at least have had the ability to appear and disappear may have been able to access four-dimensional consciousness so much under their control and so
routinely, right?
Keenly and voluntarily, that they were able to make an ortho-rotation of one of the planes of the fourth dimension, so that they could literally make themselves invisible if they wanted to, which would be
to 3D eyes, at least.
In 3D eyes. Now, does that mean that I'm trying to systematically apply Occam's razor and systematically reduce all of the highest transcendental the tricks of the trade that the masters and the gurus were able to do to pure physics? I hesitate to do that too, because I'd be the first to say that I don't know, what's beyond four-dimensional consciousness. I'm working pretty hard at trying to achieve habitual four-dimensional consciousness myself, but I have to say that it's unknown ground, and you have to be really careful. And I'm not about to say that I have much of an inkling at all of what's beyond that. And I'm sure that one of the essential characteristics of the new human, though, will be a systematic, constant, personal evolution into greater and greater dimensionality, at least until we get to the point where we can define something other than higher dimensions.
Tom, anything else? I know that you've got a lot more to discuss. Go ahead.
Well, it seems to me that most of the clay tablets that have been researched, at least by Siskin, deal with secular activities and not really delving into so much of these metaphysical or spiritual aspects amongst themselves. And maybe, they don't really talk about, that I know of what it was like on their planet Nephilim. Is there any record that they ever state to the Sumerians, well, gee, in our home world, this is what it's like, these are kind of plants we have, this is the kind of religion we have there, or whatever.
And who was writing down this? Were these scribes humans that were just taking dictation, or were they writing their impressions of what was going on about them, or were they actual part of the Nephilim starting to write things down? Leo?
Well, if all of the material is halfway accurate, it seems quite clear that consistently what we have was written down by humans. It may have been taught to us, major portions of it, technologically and astronomically and so on, clearly had to be taught to us, but I think it was humans that were writing it down.
Would you like to answer Tom's question? How come there aren't more text among the known, found, translated, interpreted Sumerian clay tablets that deal with metaphysics and esoteric knowledge and some of their higher astronomical knowledge and their historical perspective, et cetera, et cetera? I think 80% of them are laundry list kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, and that sort of thing, sure. 20% probably constitute is a fairly accurate percentage that we could attribute to significant historical stuff. I think that we have to go back and we have to ask ourselves the question. No, I should say, I should not say we should. I should say that I have approached this by simply going back and asking the question in its most general form, would we, if we were not a synthetic species and having been brought into existence as a species under the relatively, seemingly unique type of conditions that we were, if we were a natural species, evolving naturally, if Homo erectus had come along and then we had evolved eventually, or something similar to us had evolved eventually that was very similar to Homo erectus, then would we actually have a phenomenon of that we call religion at all in the first place? And I tend to think that we probably wouldn't. I think that the major features of what we consider to be religion in any of its institutionalized forms, not necessarily transcendental experience personally, but religion in the institutionalized form, I don't think we would have it all, because I think clearly that it is simply a gradual sublimation of the old status quo that we had as slaves under the Nephilim masters. Now, if that's true, then I think it is easier to understand why we don't seem to have any, even though we were taught technology, we were taught engineering, we were taught astronomy, we were taught calendrical skills. We had 60 different words for bituminous products alone in that technology. Why we weren't taught any kind of heavy-duty religion as we know it, as transmitted from the Nephilim, who obviously had more time to be around and examine the basic fundamental questions of the universe, like what the hell is this happening, what is happening here in the first place? What's the nature of the universe and reality, and how do we know truth and all that kind of good stuff? And we don't seem to have that. But what we do have, and which is sitting right there and staring us in the face, is a kind of technology that seems to have been based on a high science and a high physics, which was their whole focus and their explanation of what the universe was about. And it turns out that it seems quite clearly that they were advanced enough to have a pretty good perception of the limitations of reason and the limitations of the human mind and their type of humanoid mind, and specifically, and to have yet worked out a comprehensive, unified field that, and the reason I say that is because it seems like there, as we talked about in the last interview, there seems to be the application of a unified field theory based on a redundant self-reflexive principle extant on Mars and on Earth in their application of their their geographic principles. And then we have the other example of the human languages structured on alphabets that were specifically following the principles of self-reflexivity. So, all things considered, after all, having said all of that stuff, it comes down to a simple thing. I think the Nephilim didn't have institutionalized religion like we would conceive of it, simply because they weren't brought up under the conditions or invented under the conditions we were. They were probably a naturally evolved species. And so their concept of themselves and as part of the universe was not schizophrenic. It was not divided into spirit and matter and all that kind of jazz. They saw an integral picture of the universe. And so their science was sufficient for them. Well, of course, I hesitate to use that word science because we think of it as mechanistic science as we know it among ourselves. I think what we're really looking at is an integrated, unified field concept of the universe that was very high and that matches the highest metaphysical concepts that we have developed.